Good morning, Tampa Bay. What is going on? Welcome. Friday edition, Fired Up Friday, Channelside Sports in the morning. You know me, I am Danny. I've got a permanent co-host for the entire show today. You may know him as our good buddy, Mr. Henry Yoho of Bolts by the Bay. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing well, and we got quite a wait, it seems, until we get some Lightning hockey back on the ice.
It seems like an eternity, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. We got the focus of the whole sporting world on it now, so it is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yep, it's official as of last night. Congratulations to the Golden State Warriors, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Of course, we're going to preview Game 2 with Mr. Yoho. I've seen a lot of chatter about the greatest NHL teams of all time. So I want to get your take on that. I think that'll be a fun conversation to have. Of course, we know that the Tampa Bay Rays got swept by the Yankees last night, so we're gonna have to talk about that, unfortunately. And then we've got all kinds of Buccaneers stats and notes, and Tom Brady talking to Dan Patrick and basically putting a time frame on what's left in his career. But before we get into that, let's graze over the NBA Finals last night, Henry. Of course, we know the Golden State Warriors downed the Boston Celtics in a series that looked like it was kind of going the Boston Celtics way for a little while, at least at the beginning of the series. And Golden State was able to bounce back, and Steph Curry is now a 4-time NBA champion.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn to the Lightning series against the Avalanche. I think that the Lightning are kind of very comparable to the Warriors, and the Celtics, maybe that team where it's it might be close to their time. Maybe we'll see if that's still the case for the Avalanche, but expect for the Celtics to maybe get back in the future. And they won game 1, and it's and then they lost 4 of the next 5. So we'll see if there's a similarity to how the hockey series is shaping up too.
I think that I'm going to pull this up here. This is from the score. So you see Steph Curry is now a 2-time NBA MVP, a 4-time champion, a 1-time finals MVP, an 8-time All-Star. He's led the league in scoring. He is arguably the greatest shooter that the game has ever seen. I don't think anybody questions, you can't really question Steph Curry's greatness at this point. And in my estimation, if you are, you're really just kind of being a hater, so to speak. And you have to ask, where does Steph Curry rank all time when it comes to player rankings of the greatest of all time in NBA history? Where do you think he stacks up?
Yeah, it's I think he has to be in the conversation for probably top 10 for sure. Especially for me, it always comes back to how he's changed the game forever. Just with the way that he plays with that swagger, personality, and the 3-point shot. That's everything. I feel like he just transcends the time that he spends in the NBA, and he's going to change the game forever. So I think for part of that, he's right up there with the greatest ever. 4 championships speaks for themselves. A lot of people might want to poke holes about how he needed, Kevin Durant there in the middle to come kind of save him and beat LeBron. But I mean, what more could you say? 4 championships at this point, and this one might be the most impressive one yet.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think it really goes to show you how truly great he really is as a player, because look at where was this team last year when he was injured?
Yeah, it's crazy. Right. It's been several, I think it was 2 or 3 down years with him and Klay Thompson hurt, and they were nothing. They were a lottery team and ended up having second overall pick in one of those years. So they've risen from the ashes, but it's so weird just because I feel like people were like, yeah, they're injured, but they weren't totally dead at that point. So it's kind of a strange thing that that they still had some greatness in them.
Yeah, it's it's a fun team to watch, especially like when you get into these super team conversations. And that goes for the same for all sports, really, is when you are talking about super teams, I don't consider the Golden State Warriors a super team in terms of being built. They drafted the vast majority of their roster. Wiseman isn't even playing. He was drafted. Jordan Poole was drafted. Curry was drafted. Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. The only person that you can argue that has stepped up that wasn't drafted by them is Andrew Wiggins, but they got him for next to nothing because he wasn't really panning out in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I don't consider this, much of a super team really, just because it's all their own original talent, all their own original pieces, and they've done it through the draft. That's how you build winners. I think, maybe you could have called them a super team whenever they had Durant there to go head to head with LeBron and the sort of a super team that he assembled. But I certainly wouldn't call what they've created a super team. That's just
Right.
A masterclass in scouting, management, and all the rest. So,
no, I'm totally with you on that. Well, shout out to the Golden State Warriors, and even LeBron James is saying, like, you've got to acknowledge Steph Curry as one of the greats. And I'm very active in the NBA community, so I know that a lot of the people that will not regard Steph Curry as one of the greatest players are in that LeBron James cult fan base of he's the only player that's ever played. He's the greatest. I'm a basketball fan, Henry. I think Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time because of what he did for the game, because that's what I value as an individual is the elevation that he brought to the entire league. LeBron James is a great player. I can appreciate both. This like fan base that like LeBron James has, they have to talk badly about Jordan, talk badly about Kobe, talk badly about Curry. Like you don't need to do that. If you like basketball, you like basketball. And that's pretty much it.
yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that's just part of the society we live in now. Everyone's got to just pick one side or the other, and your side is right and the other one's wrong. And I think that more so in basketball probably than any other sport, where the individuals and the personalities are so big and so strong that pretty much everyone sticks to their one guy now more so than any allegiance to a team. Everyone has their guy and they believe that they're better than the next person. But I think that's just reflective of sort of the world and society that we live in now.
It's a very well spoken phrase there, Henry. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's just the way way basketball is more so than anything else.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I believe it's possibly because it's only 5 guys on the court for each team, and you're very close, and there's no helmet getting in the way. Like I feel like that's where they're like if you look at football, it's hard to get like that personal relationship unless you've got a guy that's like out there doing podcasts regularly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. There's no helmet, there's no gear, there's no hats. There's, you're out there and you're who that's who you are right there. You're not, you're not using anything else, and the personalities, the faces, the emotions are right out there in the open more so than anything else. So that's part of why I think people attach to these characters and these strong personalities as well.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So as we move along, we've got a huge game tomorrow. Unfortunately, the huge game is not tonight for our Tampa Bay Lightning. What are you expecting to see out of this Lightning team as they head into Game 2 tomorrow?
Yeah, I would expect to see a more engaged effort. I think that how could you not have the second game against the Rangers in the back of your mind? It's the same situation, starting out 1-0 on the road, and that was the first time that they lost back-to-back games. And I thought that the engagement level wasn't totally there in that instance, and the Rangers kind of surprised them again. After that long layoff, I certainly would expect the engagement level to be a lot higher if you're not ready for for Game 2 of the Cup final, then I don't know what you could ever be ready for. So I would expect nothing short of a great response. And if we don't get it, then that would be really disappointing. But it's still a long series to go.
Yeah, I think for me, and that's why I put Brandon Hagel on our morning show graphic this morning. I have one of those Henry Yoho feelings about him.
Yeah.
For tomorrow.
Yeah, rightfully so.
I'm not going to say that he's going to go out and score 2 goals, but what I am noticing from him is we touched on this yesterday where he said, Victor Hedman looks a little slow. He looks a little bit lost. Brandon Hagel looks like this is a guy that was questionable coming into the first game with an ankle. He is a guy he's never taken plays off. He's 120% every single play, whether he's banged up or he's not banged up. And I really think that we look to Steven Stamkos, we look to Nikita Kucherov, we look to like our veteran leadership, but I also feel like they need to kind of surge off of that energy that Brandon Hagel is putting on the ice every single shift.
Yeah, they're going to have to get something from somebody like him at some point, especially in a game like this. And I thought that, the scoring hasn't necessarily been there for him since he's come over from Chicago. He was I believe, a 21 goal scorer before landing in Tampa. And, he didn't really have a spot carved out for him in an offensive role. He's not playing with Patrick Kane anymore. It's his role's a bit different, and he's accepted it, and he has performed well in what he has done once he's kind of carved out who he thinks he can be on this team. And I think he's been very impactful, especially I think that he does have a pretty good motor going around out there. I think he's got to be comparable to Blake Coleman, a similar type of player that they brought in and looking to perform a pretty similar role. But I think that they could certainly expect to get something out of him at some point because he's had a ton of great chances. I think I'm not huge into analytics, but I remember I saw from in the playoffs, he was probably one of the highest players in the whole playoffs of any individual of expected goals for, and he really didn't get anything out of the Rangers series. So I think that he's certainly due for something here at some point.
I just feel like he's one of the guys that he's like an unsung hero for this team. He's not a vocal leader, and he doesn't need to be a vocal leader. We don't need that many. I don't even know if you can use this phrase in 2022, but you don't need that many Chiefs. You need more Indians.
Yeah.
Right? I apologize if I'm going to get canceled for that now, but he's accepted his role, like you said, and that's not a goal scoring role, and that's okay. If you're still able to fit in and gel and mesh with a team and bring championship results or, bring high level results, I think even as a competitor, you're okay with that because you know what your role is. I don't think there's anything worse than feeling lost when you're on a team.
Yeah. That's what championship teams are made of. You have to have everybody buy into the ultimate goal. And if you have, even one person, not totally bought into, the team and their processes, then that can bring a team down. And I think the buy-in from the people who have been around sets the tone for everybody else who's new. Because like we've mentioned before, this team has a lot of the same pieces, but they've got a lot of people who are new. And this is their first time going through a cup run like this. And when those veterans and people who've been around can set the tone with, the mentality that you need to have to win a championship, I think that everyone else can fall in line from there.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I've been seeing a lot of chatter about is, where does this Lightning team rank amongst the greatest teams ever? Currently, let's set this cup aside right now, just the back-to-back run. Where do you think this Lightning team would rank when we're talking about some of the greatest ever?
Yeah, I think they're certainly right up there. It's hard to it's really hard to compare, from some of the different iterations and generations of this league. You always hear about the salary cap era because I think that the game completely changed at that point. You've got more teams in the mix. It's more difficult to keep guys around. So the salary cap era is unquestionably they're one of the greatest teams ever, and I think that you can go beyond that as well. to some of the greatest teams of all time. Of course, we talked about, for a lot of the league's history, a lot of the Stanley Cup's history, there were only 5 other teams to go up against. So I think it's hard to compare from that sense, just because I feel like the game was completely different at that point. And with all of the speed and skill that we have now, it's almost unrecognizable watching some older footage. So you always hear about the salary cap era, and rightfully so, to define like the way that this league operates now. And I think that they're certainly among the greatest teams in that for sure. And beyond that, I think they're also in the conversation as well.
So how much weight do you hold on the pre-salary cap era wins? Like if you and I are having this debate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, the Montreal Canadiens are the greatest team of all time because they had all these wins. What did they win? Like 6 in a row, something like that?
I think they maxed out at 5 in a row. And I think
Is that what it was? Okay.
I think that they won 5 in a row once, and I think that they probably won 4 in a row, 3 in a row, multiple times.
Right.
They've won 28 of them, I believe. So what more can you say about that?
Right. But like how much weight do you hold on to that? Like if you're having this conversation with somebody?
Yeah, I think that they're hockey's most historic franchise. They've got all the championships, but I don't think you could say that they were the greatest at that time. But like whenever the game has changed more in the modern times, I think that you could maybe consider the teams that we saw in the 80s maybe greater dynasties than Montreal, who won a lot of theirs before that time. 4 in a row for the Islanders. The Oilers won 4 with Wayne, and they won a 5th without him. I think you could talk about those. I think you could equate, shorter windows to the whole time of the Montreal Canadiens as well. The Islanders and the Oilers. I think they're all in the conversation right there. And I don't maybe put as much. It's just hard to say that Montreal at that point in time was one of the greatest teams ever. It's tough when there's, you're able to hold on to players forever and there's, less teams to compete against.
Yeah. And perhaps it's, like a recency bias argument, because I've seen a lot of people talk about, okay, well, this Lightning team is probably one of the top 5 teams of all time. And then say that means, also the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pittsburgh Penguins, because they won back-to-back. They won at the highest level. They won during the salary cap era. They won after basically in the same league that we're all playing in currently.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I agree with it solely on the fact that it's because of the salary cap. I'm not slighting the Canadiens or any of the teams that won pre-salary cap, but I think for me it's more justifiable to say that these current teams that are winning with basically within restrictions and they're consistently winning at a high level. I think that's where I would make my argument of I'll give those teams the nod from before the salary cap. I'll give those teams, their dues, but I still think that when we're looking at teams like the Red Wings when they won, the Lightning, the Blackhawks, the Penguins, I say, okay, well, these are probably some of the greatest, if not the greatest teams of all time. And then I look at the Lightning and go, well, they're the only team out of the 3 teams that I just mentioned that made it to a 3rd Stanley Cup. So I think that there is a very solid argument for saying that this is probably a top 2, top 3, maybe best team of all time in the NHL.
Yeah. Like I said, it's hard to compare between the eras, just because the game was so different at times. I'd be willing to say that if the Lightning win this 3rd one in a row, that they would be probably the greatest dynasty of the salary cap era. And I think if you have that title, then you could be in the conversation among the greatest teams of any era. But it's certainly hard.
GOAT conversation.
Yeah, you can be in the conversation. I don't think you could declare them the greatest dynasty in the league's history. People could say that. I wouldn't believe that, it would be definitive. But I think that being the greatest team in the salary cap era could be a bit more definitive.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's an easier argument to make because, you've got the same metrics across the board for all teams in this era. So it is an easier argument to make, because we can all bring stats to any argument, and everybody will bring their opinion to an argument, but the stats back up the opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like I said, I would believe that they'd be probably the best dynasty of the salary cap era, and the best argument would probably be for Chicago. Their 3 championships came over 6 years, I believe, and you could say, well, their success was more sustained. Well, you could really say the same about the Lightning. I mean, they won 3 in a row, but they've been a contender for a while. Obviously, they've made playoffs every year under John Cooper, and even before the sweep after winning the President's Trophy against Columbus, everyone comes back to that as kind of the start. But I don't think that was really the start. They went to the Eastern Conference Final 3 times before that. They made it to the Cup Final once, so they've been a contender for a while, and they've been getting over the mountain now. On the verge of doing it 3 times in a row. So I think that would be the sort of argument against maybe why Chicago. That would probably be they would probably be the existing kings of the salary cap period.
Yeah, those Chicago teams were pretty damn good. Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, like that. Yeah, those were some good teams, and I hadn't fully transitioned into being a Lightning fan at that point, and I was a Red Wings fan. So obviously, how I personally felt about those teams. Not a happy camper.
Yeah, that was that was where this thing started for me with John Cooper. They went up against the Wings 2 times in a row in playoffs, and I feel like we heard a lot of conversations just about everything in this league comes back to Toronto, and they talk about the Leafs not being able to get out of the first round for ever so many years, and they talk about how the Lightning, whenever they got out of the first round after beating Columbus, that they try to draw the similarities to that. I just don't see it, because I think that the Lightning already proven that they can be a contender in playoffs. They already accomplished a lot by the time that just sort of changed things. But they had already accomplished so much and have been a contender for a while. So, whenever we were having that conversation in the first round, the comparisons to the Leafs and their sort of struggles, I just think it's not quite the same.
No, I think the Leafs are on this current Leafs team anyway is on the verge of a breakout, and I think we all saw that. We all saw that in the first round, taking our Lightning to 7 games. And for the vast majority, even though we won the series, the vast majority of that series, we were outplayed by the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can't help but think back to that series. It was everything as far as the landscape of hockey in the NHL for me. I follow a lot of the Canadian coverage and the radio programming and that, and so everything in this league comes back to Toronto, and everyone's like, this final, how does it impact Toronto? And it just shows how close they were to beating a team that was on the verge of being one of the best ever. So it's just fun the way that the conversation in the NHL kind of always revolves around them.
Well, I think that I'm going to try to draw a parallel here. Is like when you look at the NBA, right? And you say, okay, well, where are our biggest markets? I think the NBA is better when the New York Knicks are good. I think the NHL is better off if the Toronto Maple Leafs are good, because that's like their hub. Like you were saying, like everything is, how does it affect Toronto? How does this affect Toronto? And I think that's really what it boils down to. And I guess that's one of the unfortunate things when you're a Lightning fan is you don't want Toronto to be good, because you've got a rivalry between, right? You've got a rivalry between our 2 teams. So I think that's where it makes it difficult, at least like in our area, for our fan base to go, yeah, but objectively, I would really like for the Maple Leafs to be good, because I think that's just better for hockey.
Yeah, I think you sometimes have to draw a distinction, especially in this market of being, a ton of people are Lightning fans, and I don't think that there are quite as many of those people who are greater fans of the NHL and the game as a whole. So I believe that the NHL is certainly better off when, you got, Toronto better, New York. I think that conversation helps really grow the game a lot more when you've got the biggest franchises, the original 6, We had 3 of them in the playoffs this year, but I think that the game and everyone is better off when you have those biggest teams competing, just because that's just the nature of this sport.
Yep, I'm 100% on board with that. I think that when you look at the grand scheme of things, if you're a fan of the sport, you need certain teams to play well. Just
Hmm.
if you look at mixed martial arts, if the UFC is running 3-4 stinkers for pay-per-views that people don't care about, the entire sport of mixed martial arts goes down. Like there's certain things that you just need to happen. And we've got the ESPN deal. Whether we think Sean McDonough is a good commentator or not, like we're on ESPN as NHL fans now. It's a huge lucrative deal. A lot of TV money is coming in. A lot of advertising money is coming in. There's all of these great things. You touched on it. New York is good. Finally, is good. Like we've got a lot of positive momentum going forward. And our Tampa Bay Lightning could be at the very forefront of all of that positive momentum, which is really exciting.
Yeah, the TV deals were huge. When you get your sport showcased on, like you said, whether you really like their coverage or not, being on ESPN is the biggest thing you can have, just because
Yep.
they set the sports agenda. They get the most eyeballs, no matter what's being shown,
Mhm.
and the ratings are a lot better than they have been in years past. Of course, NBC was on before. They had fine coverage, but they just weren't. It had run their course with NBC, and I think that things had kind of maxed out with them, and the ability now to grow the league to bigger and newer audiences through ESPN and Turner is something that's great for the league.
Yeah, I really, really, really wish that they would just throw a bunch of money at Doc Emrick and say, "Hey, will you come out of retirement? We'll buy out," because I know he's still under contract with NBC because he's still doing like voiceover work and stuff for them.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, ESPN bought out Joe Buck and they bought out Troy Aikman. I really wish that they would. I really wish they would do that. I guess quick little fun story about Doc Emrick used to call hockey games for the Port Huron Flags up in Michigan, and my grandfather played for that team, so he's kind of always been tied to my family in a sense. So maybe there's a little bias there in me, but I'm like, man, just the way that guy calls hockey is like it's fantastic. He's like, to me, he's like the John Madden or Pat Summerall or Howard Cosell, whoever you think is like the greatest commentators in like football. I think he is the greatest commentator that we've had in hockey.
Yeah, no, I agree. As someone who wants to get into play-by-play, especially in hockey, that's the person for me. Growing up, you always know it's a big game whenever he's on it, and it's especially
Mhm.
exciting because truthfully, he didn't really do a lot of lightning, especially in the regular season. It was really whenever they were good, and whenever he was doing a lightning game, that was really exciting. You knew it was something big whenever you got to that point. Um, but yeah, I think that the coverage on ESPN has maybe been a little disappointing, considering how much it was hyped up, and I feel like they didn't really bring in a lot of people that were, hockey was their thing, at least for the play-by-play. But I'm not really one to pick apart at play-by-play, especially for a job that I would want. But
Sure.
uh, but I respect everyone as commentators, but I don't necessarily think that they were the most hockey people to begin with.
Right.
We would have loved to have seen Mike Emmerich or even Gary Thorne, who had defined the NHL and ESPN era. So he was
Yep.
the boy. Those are voices of the generation, and whether or not the people that exist at ESPN currently become the voice of this generation or not, still to be seen.
Yeah. I think, give everybody a fair shot. And it's, like I said, for me, it's bias. Like when I say, oh, I'm not a big fan of Sean McDonough.
Hmm.
Eh, But I came to that conclusion during the Rangers series because I'm listening to him commentate and I'm going, this guy's a Rangers fan. There's no way that he's not a Rangers fan because he's commenting on, oh, the crowd's doing this, the crowd's saying that, they missed this call. And then you've got Ray Ferraro and there's like, no, I'm down here on the ice. Everything's good. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, like, what is happening here? Like, this is to me, I was like, this is like a weird dynamic for commentary where your guys are essentially not lining up in their thought process. And it's not that they're bickering, but it's this guy is saying one thing and the other guy is saying, yeah, no, you're completely wrong. And that's just a new dynamic for me when it comes to watching any sports commentary.
Yeah, it's I think that ESPN has had a hard time in this first year. Of course, it's year one. They've got they've got time to figure it out and try to
Yeah,
find the
for
way that
sure.
find the way that they want to fit in. I thought at TNT Turner has killed it in year one. I feel like they've
Yes.
been a lot more popular, and they've been different. NBC was pretty by the book, pretty professional. I enjoyed their coverage, but TNT has been different. They
Yep.
haven't been afraid to do different things, and uh, you know, Paul Bissonnette's the biggest reason for that. It's somebody
Yep.
different, somebody new, somebody fun, and they nailed it in year one, and ESPN's going to try to find how they can fit in too.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to dictate that, is because we have Turner is going more so for like our style of crowd, where ESPN, obviously they're a larger entity, especially when it comes to sports. And even for basketball, they kind of have the same cookie cutter coverage. So I don't know if they're ever going to change the style of coverage that they have to match like the energy that TNT and TBS is bringing us, because I think they've found their groove and they know what works for them, and they kind of just, no, this is what we do. We've been around for such a long time. We are the top of the mountain when it comes to sports coverage, and this is how we do things. And if you don't like it, tough.
Yeah. I think that TNT, as it was before they even brought hockey on, had probably the best pre and post game coverage with the NBA on TNT.
Mhm.
Those guys, whether you really care about basketball or what they really have to say, people enjoy watching just because they're funny.
Yeah.
They have great personalities and they're a lot of fun, and you can learn a lot about basketball from them. And I'd probably put them above a lot of the guys, even in the NFL, who have great setups as well. But they those are the guys, and the NHL kind of replicated what they were going for with the basketball crowd. So
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's their formula, clearly, right? Because now they're doing it with two sports. So that's clearly their formula and it's working. I mean, they were even similar during the Olympic coverage when they would be on the Turner networks. It would be like the off-brand sports, but you're sitting here watching it going, "Oh wow, like I care about curling? Like this is crazy," because they're entertaining commentary, and it's not like your cookie cutter stuff, which I like too. Don't get me wrong, I like it as well, but I think it makes it's a tough draw when you've got something essentially new and innovative in terms of how hockey is being presented versus very similar presentations to what we've seen over the last 3 decades.
mhm. Yeah, I think hockey's just and all the sports are as well, but everything's so buttoned up, especially on the big networks, and I think ESPN would fall under that. And that's the way that they roll. Um,
Yep.
TNT and has been a little bit more casual. So there's a space for both. So it's just a matter of finding what sort of balance works best for you. Because I love watching the Canadian coverage. I love watching Hockey Night in Canada, Sportsnet. I think that those broadcasts are the best of the
Yes, I
NHL,
agree.
and it's so fun watching them. Being a kid from Florida, watching that whenever I can, like through NHL.tv and ESPN Plus. That's the ultimate, and they're formal more so than TNT, and that's what works for them.
And it's weird, right? Because I love the formality of Hockey Night in Canada and Sportsnet. And I don't know if that's just because to me that's nostalgic,
Hmm.
because growing up in Detroit, like we would have the local broadcast of Red Wings games on Pass, which was essentially like their local Red Wings affiliate. But then you'd also flip up like, I don't know, 2-3 channels up, and then we've got Sportsnet, and then I can watch the same broadcast from there. And I don't know, maybe that just resonates more with me because it like strikes a nerve kind of, because everything that I'm going, well, I wish ESPN would change is identical to what they're doing with Sportsnet, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just what fits there. Yeah, that's always what I would love to watch. Of course, it's difficult too here in Florida, and I always, whenever I watch, the American broadcasts of these playoff games, I love to watch the replays the next day on the Canadian one. It's harder to do now with no longer having NHL.tv, but you have to like watch on ESPN Plus, and sometimes the Canadian feeds aren't available, especially when ESPN has the main. But yeah, that's the way I appreciate hockey the most is their coverage, and that's when you hear that theme song, the old one and the new one, you just know that's something special.
Yep. Well, and and I felt the same way about when. So I'm actually Kevin Weeks and I have been like LinkedIn connections for a while, and we'll message each other back and forth. And when ESPN announced that they were signing the NHL, and then he announced that he was going there, like he and we had like a 25-minute conversation about our memories of the the NHL on ESPN theme song. And
it's the best.
And it's just, that was my favorite part. Like immediately, I was like, "Oh my god, we get to hear the theme song again."
Yeah, those are the memories and the emotions that things like that can bring up. Yeah, the Lightning were the very last game on the ESPN on ABC, and every once in a while when I'd watch that old game, you'd hear the theme song, and obviously I was pretty young at that point in time, and bringing that back, it kind of created more excitement that a lot of people felt in past times. So it's been fun to have that back, and that's something that people remember most.
Absolutely. Do you have time to talk about the Rays while you're on?
Yeah, sure.
I want to do this with you because I want to draw. People have been trying to draw parallels between John Cooper and Kevin Cash, and I don't think that that's fair to do because the Lightning spend money, and we know that the Tampa Bay Rays have basically locked up their checkbook. They've put it in a vault. It's in a time capsule 6 feet under the ground. And of course, we know that the Rays got swept by the Yankees yesterday. And if the Red Sox continued handling business against the A's yesterday, we're talking about a team that's only a half game out of dropping to 4th place in their division. And a lot of Rays fans always fall back to it's a long season. It's a long season. If we are looking, like, eventually we have to stop saying it's a long season. We all believe that the Tampa Bay Rays are a good team. They had 100 wins last season, and they were in the World Series 2 years ago. Kevin Cash was the manager of the year back-to-back. I'm not a fan of using like personal regular season accolades to like back up my statements of a team should be good or shouldn't be good. And then I always fall back to Aaron Rodgers. He's got 4 MVPs. He's got 1 Super Bowl. Regular season awards don't necessarily equate to you winning a championship, especially in a team sport. Why do we, as Rays fans, why are we so quick to fire off excuses instead of just saying, yeah, well, we didn't win the World Series. We're a good team. We should be a contending team. We are a contending team. Because everybody in the Rays fan base thinks that this team is very good. And this team should be good. We don't spend money. We know that, but that hasn't been a reason why we're not good, right? Mm-hmm. I just, for me, I feel like we hang our hats like fans of losing teams do, where we go, oh, yeah, well, here are the reasons we didn't win. Oh, well, yeah, but you said that this was a contender at the beginning of the season. Like, I feel like that's such a weird thing. And then they'll draw parallels and go, well, John Cooper, everybody wanted John Cooper gone. Nobody wanted John Cooper. Look at what he's doing now. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's a fair assessment. I don't like that comparison between the two.
Yeah, I don't either, just because of the dynamics of baseball and hockey are so different. The salary cap is a big reason for that. In baseball, you got big teams and you got little teams, and the Rays truly are a little team from the perspective of how much their payroll is and the money that they're bringing in. It's not an even fight ultimately, just when your division is so good and when you've got two of the giants in the league in your division. I just believe that for the Rays, they put a lot of great teams out there, especially compared to the money that they're spending and the resources that they have compared to those teams that are in the division. They put good teams out there, and no matter how good they are, I usually feel like even if they make it to the World Series or however far it is, that there always is just going to be a team that's always bigger and better. They got more money, they got more stars. I just feel like there's just always going to be somebody better.
But you have a realistic approach to it, though, right? Like that, and I think that's the difference. That's where I've been essentially. I was on Buck What You Heard last night with Gene, and I was like, I've been essentially alienated from the Rays fan base for my take on that. Of don't tell me you fully believe in this team and then not chalk up the season as a failure if they don't win, right? Like, do you think that there's Yankees fans sitting there, any team that's in first place right now in their division? Do you think that there's fans of any of those teams that are going to, if they don't win the World Series, go, well, here are the reasons why we didn't win the World Series, instead of just saying, well, I mean, we didn't get it done. And that's what it really boils down to, is Tom Brady came out of retirement because he had unfinished business. He wasn't saying, well, I won the NFC South, so I think I'm good. I was in the NFC Championship game, so I'm good. Like, he plays to win championships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's just part of the dynamic of the way that you can't get away from the two teams in the division. And I think sometimes just being able to compete and stuff is impressive in its own. The Rays, most recent run of the World Series, they had to beat the Yankees in round one, which they took down the giant. That's the biggest team there is. They beat the Yankees. They beat the Astros, who'd been in the World Series multiple times before that, had won. Whether you put their cheating scandal a part of it or not, they were still a great team. They beat them, and there was just one more team in the way, and it was just another team that was bigger, better, had more stars, and they were just better. And sometimes making it to that point and just being able to compete on the same field as the bigger teams is sometimes good enough. But that's just the dynamic of baseball. I just think that there's always just going to be someone that's bigger and better.
I mean, but the Rays could spend more money.
Yeah, they could.
They're like third from the bottom in terms of payroll. Fifth from the bottom, I apologize, in terms of payroll. They definitely could spend more money if they really wanted to. And I'm not saying like you don't have to go out and sign super max deals to all these players, right? Like, but we've got to get more consistency. Like the problems that the Rays are showing right now, and injuries aside, because to me, I think using the injury card is an easy way out. If you're good enough to get to this level, you should be able to be counted on to be at least a decent player. The Rays are very, very close to leading the league in unearned runs allowed. They're very close to leading the league in errors. They are in the bottom of the barrel in terms of batting average, in terms of fielding. Like this is a team that is having all of these coaching issues. And like I said, I'm not saying fire Kevin Cash, because I don't think that at the end of the day, I don't think that he is the issue with this team. But we've got to hold him more accountable, and we've got to make his seat a little hot, because I feel like he's sitting pretty right now going, well, the league thought I was the best manager 2 years in a row, so it can't be on me. And I think that they need to warm up his seat a little bit and put a little pressure and just be like, dude, we've got injuries. Yeah, we're missing our star players. Sure. But all of the intangible things that you coach are the problems with this team currently.
Hmm. Yeah, that's been one of the most disappointing things. Is of course there has been a lot of injuries and there's been a lot of struggles, but over the course of the season, that's going to happen to every team. And for me, I think that I just noticed the fielding. For me, it doesn't matter how you're hitting or the people that you have. I feel like when you're fielding a Major League Baseball team, you should have people that can field their position. And there's been error after error this team gets hurt by. And as far as Kevin Cash goes, I've never really known what to make of him. I don't necessarily know. I feel like he is just more of a extension of the front office and general manager. I feel like he is a lot of times playing out, a lot of the decisions that come from there. So it's really hard to make of how great of a manager you really feel that he is. But even if you feel that he's just an extension of the general manager, you still have to have a feel for your players and a feel for the emotions of that clubhouse. And I just have a hard time of really assessing how responsible he is for the failures or even some of the successes as well.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, for me, I don't know if he's the guy to blame. I don't know if he's not the guy to blame, because I think that there are other underlying issues that prevent me from taking a hard stand on either side of that argument. Because I can objectively look at this team and say, well, I know what the problems are. Because I can look at a team that I've got the Detroit Tigers logo tattooed on my arm. Like I'm forever tied to that team. And I look at what the Tigers are doing and go, okay, well, they're on an infinite rebuild with no ending in sight. We don't know what's going on in there, but we can see a path of what they're trying to do. The Rays just seem content on saying, well, hey, we're a smaller team and we play pretty well. And as a fan of the Rays, I don't want that. I want them to be better than that. And this is what has been like getting Rays fans all angry with me is my expectations are for you to win a World Series. I don't go into the NFL season going, well, hey, I sure hope the Bucks only win 2 games because they've been getting beat by the Saints in the regular season. So I'll be happy if they win 2 games. I want Tom Brady to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. I want Lord Stanley's Cup to come back to Tampa Bay. Why can't we have that same expectation and that same desire for the Tampa Bay Rays? That's just a weird dynamic with that fan base. And that's just something I can't understand, and I can't comprehend that.
Yeah, I think that, depending on where things go this season, of course, there's a ton of runway to go, but the Rays could find themselves in a really weird in-between place. I believe in pretty much every sport, you either have to be getting good fast or you've got to be getting bad fast, and to have a direction of where you want to go. And I feel like if you're in between, you're not really going anywhere. And I'm not sure that, the Rays are in a mode where they should win now.
Yep.
They have a lot of great pieces in place. But if it doesn't work out this year, I feel like they're just kind of weirdly in between of whether they think that they can be a contender or not.
No, and that's, to me, that's where I say, well, why as fans, why don't we say we want a better product? Like, why don't we just say, hey, as fans, we would like to see. ESPN says that this team is too good to not be considered a contender. This is what they said at the beginning of the season. I think it was like their 3rd power rankings release. This team is too good to not miss the postseason. Now we're talking and I get it. We're still in June, but the summer months is when you start prepping for the fall. It's when you start prepping for the playoffs. And we're over here talking about, yeah, but we're playing okay and we're injured. You're like, no, we need to be working towards getting better. We should be on the phone making phone calls. we should be saying, hey, who's available? Looking at players that are available, looking at like a Juan Soto. His name's brought up all the time when it comes to the Tampa Bay Rays making a trade. Look at some of these guys where you go, hey, like, how do we improve? How do we build upon? We talk about 100-win season with pride, right? How do we build upon that? How do we build up instead of, because I can already foresee what's going to happen is we don't finish this season great. And then next season, everybody goes, yeah, but we're only 3 years removed from a World Series, and we're only 2 years removed from a 100-win season. You go, yeah, but we didn't build upon that. Good teams continue to progress forward, and they continue to build. This is a good team, and we continue to like treat them as fans like they are a bad team that's overachieving.
Yeah, you realize how hard it is to get to the top, especially in this sport. The Rays have been a contender now and a good team for, ever since 2008. Really,
Yeah.
Every year they're pretty good. Over the course of that time, there's been a few bad years here and there, but it shows you how hard it is. They made it to the World Series in 2008, and things didn't work out. They didn't get back there until 2020, 12 years later.
Yeah.
That just shows you how hard it is to get back, no matter how highly you think of your team at that point in time. There's a lot of other teams that want it. There's only one World Series. That's it.
Yep.
There's only one team that can win at the end, and it's tough. You don't appreciate how hard it is to get to the top if you're doing it all the time, and it's hard. You get there once, and 12 years later you get back. You win one more game than you did before in the World Series, and that's just the way it is.
I'm 100% there. We got to talk a little Bucks. We got to talk football before we head off. I'm going to throw this list out here, and I'm not going to tell you the context of it because I want to get your reaction. The best play callers in the league were released yesterday by Pro Football Focus, and I'm going to read them. I'm going to read you the top 5. Number 1, we have Andy Reid. Number 2, we've got Kellen Moore. Number 3, we've got Byron Leftwich. Number 4, we've got Kyle Shanahan. And number 5, we have Sean McVay. And I already heard the noise when I mentioned Kellen Moore as the second best play caller in the NFL.
Yeah, I guess that must be built on. I guess you associate all of those guys for the most part with just being offensive gurus, I suppose. But Moore being up there, that's a pretty surprising one. They've had some good offenses, and he's still pretty new. But that's it's pretty surprising to be considered among the very best for sure.
So the context for this, because I saw the list, like I saw the graphic that they posted on their social media, and I was like, what the hell? There's no way. I have to figure out like what was the criteria to get ranked. Because Byron Leftwich, let's face it, he doesn't really get a whole lot of publicity either. He was always kind of in the shadows behind Arians and Tom Brady. Well, this is Tom Brady's team. Bruce Arians just coaches it. Oh, yeah, but by the way, we also have Byron Leftwich, who does all of these things. So the criteria for this rank was the percentage of times that they have met or exceeded or even become close to scoring their expected points per game. And the Dallas Cowboys were the second best team in the NFL last season at doing that.
Okay,
so I guess shout out to Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I guess that's more in the deeper dive into numbers and things like that. So I guess that's where they're coming from.
Yeah, but that's why that's why I always use Pro Football Focus to talk, because like their stats are right up my alley. That's what I like to talk about with other people. Which brings me to my next point, where they're talking about and we talk a lot about Baker Mayfield on this show. And we talk a lot about Baker Mayfield because A, people think that he's a terrible quarterback when he's not that bad of a quarterback. And B, Tom Brady's gone after this season, and we've got to figure out what we're going to do at quarterback, because if we are in the hands of Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask, this team is probably not going to be for the better, regardless of all of the fantastic pieces that we have in place.
Yeah, no, I would agree. There is certainly uncertainty, and I think that was known whenever Brady came here in the first place, that he's not going to be here forever.
Mm-hmm.
You might get some good years, and beyond that, no one really knows. But I don't think anyone would trade it for that Super Bowl. And I'm sure that whether you think that Jameis was the guy or not, I'm sure they would have liked to have kept somebody around who they felt like could have been that guy for the future. So this uncertainty that they face now shouldn't be something that should be a surprise. This was a known thing, that that day was gonna come at some point, and it's not too far away.
Yep. Well, Brady was on the Dan Patrick show recently, and he said, I had the appetite to compete, and it's going to be gone soon. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've got to just really appreciate the time I have left, because it's not a lot. I mean, he's doing everything outside of physically saying, hey, this is my last season, which I think he should do, honestly. I think that, and I know Tom Brady is kind of bigger than the sport, or not bigger than the sport in terms of how he views himself. You know what I mean? Where he's like, hey, I work for this league. I'm part of this team. But I feel like he owes it to himself, and he owes it to his fans to say, hey, before the season, just so you guys are aware, this is my last season. That gives fans the ability to come out, see his swan song at whatever stadium you go and watch him at. And we knew Peyton Manning was going to be done. We knew Kobe was retiring. We knew Jordan was retiring. Like, we knew all of these greats were retiring. And I feel like Tom Brady owes that to himself and owes that to the fans, if this is for sure going to be his last season, saying, hey, this is it, guys. This is the final run, and this is the last dance, so to speak. Let's hope for the best.
Yeah, I think it would be good for the peace of mind, especially for management, to keep in mind that that's not going to be there for the next year. But it's tough when you got a guy like that can still compete at this level. I think that you could probably expect that for some reason, if he keeps playing beyond this one season, I feel like the writing's been on the wall that maybe the time in Tampa has been over beyond that. But I always believe that Brady would just keep playing until he couldn't anymore, until he wasn't any good. And we didn't see any signs of that last year. So I think that's part of the commitment, or the lack of commitment, to whether he ends up playing beyond this season or not.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Well, and you touched on it. He's still playing at a high level, and he's still playing at the highest of high levels, where he's the only quarterback who has passed for more than 9,600 yards in the last 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I get it. We've got Mike Evans. We've got Chris Godwin. He had Antonio Brown. He had Gronk. Other teams could have had Antonio Brown. They didn't want Antonio Brown. And how did Antonio Brown work out for us? Come on. We talk about Antonio Brown stripping down more than anything else that he did that was positive for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization during his time here.
Yeah. Highest of highs and the lowest of lows. I think that's to be expected when you bring in somebody like that. But yeah, everyone talks about how it ended, but I really remember that catch in the Super Bowl. He was a difference maker, and that made everything else that came with it somewhat worth it to me.
Oh, 100%. And this goes again to, like, I have the ability to disconnect personal crap from your performance on the field. And as a player, I love Antonio Brown. I think he is one of the best receivers I have ever had the privilege of watching. When it comes, like, how many times would you see him in Pittsburgh and he would just do that flash right from the line of scrimmage? Ben Roethlisberger would pass it to him, and he'd take it to the house for 25 plus yards, almost routinely, knowing that he's going to do this, and you still couldn't stop him from doing that. Like, fantastic talent.
Yeah. Before all the off the field stuff really became a bigger thing at the end of his time in Pittsburgh, I thought that he was on a trajectory to become maybe the best wide receiver ever. He had a great fit there, and then unfortunately things kind of went off the rails there in Pittsburgh, and for him and his personal life, it was unfortunate. But there's still a great talent there, and I think that there probably is a place for a player like that on any sort of contending team if you could make the dynamic work.
Absolutely. As we try to wrap this up, I have a couple more things that I wanted to, if you've got the time. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just talk to myself, which is fine. I do that a lot anyway.
No, I'm here.
As we talk about the quarterback situation in Tampa Bay, we know that Tom Brady is, if I had to guess and put a number to it, I would say we're probably in the high 90s in percentage of Tom Brady not being here next season. So then you look at guys like who could possibly be available. Obviously Roethlisberger, and this is the amount of dropped pass percentages to where these balls were thrown on target and the wide receiver did not haul it in for whatever reason. It hit their hands. It was a catchable ball, and they didn't haul it in. And the reason why I show this list is because there's two names on here that stand out to me, and one being Jimmy Garoppolo and two being Baker Mayfield. I know that neither are popular names, and a lot of people will say, yeah, but these aren't good quarterbacks. They're not good quarterbacks. Give Kyle Trask a chance. I can't say I don't disagree with the give Kyle Trask a chance thing. However, at the same time, the coaching staff that sees this guy at practice every single day thinks he's the third best quarterback on this team.
Yeah, I would think that's a fair assessment. I'm not sure, if you could really do better in the post-Brady time of finding somebody, whether it's free agency or through a trade. I feel like those would probably be the top guys available, but I believe that they should also, like you said, give Trask a chance. But, the people who run and manage the team probably have the best feel for where they believe that he's at. And they must not feel at this point that he's ready to assume even the second spot in their rotation. So they probably have the best feel of that for anybody, for sure.
Yep. And so the reason why I show this is because we have the vast majority of NFL fans will say, oh, Baker Mayfield's not accurate or Jimmy Garoppolo is not accurate. And if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo, he is fourth on this list, where 7.5% of his passing attempts were receiver drops. If we're adding an extra 7.5% to my completion percentage, we're talking, that's a huge number. That's a great leap forward.
Yeah, I agree. I've always thought Jimmy's been just a solid quarterback. And he's a winner too. He's got a great record. He might not be anything special or particularly dynamic or anything, but I think that he is a good quarterback who can fit into a good team environment for sure. And he won in his time in New England. He's won in his time in San Francisco. Obviously, he was pretty banged up and didn't look like a championship caliber quarterback in the playoffs this past year. But I think that he's a solid quarterback. I think that that you're going to get something decent with him.
And I think the thing that's crazy for me about Jimmy Garoppolo is the narrative that surrounds him is, yeah, but he's performed well because he's on a good team in San Francisco. Well, I think the Buccaneers have a better team than San Francisco, so why would we not want to get somebody that performs well because the team around him performs well? Because I think that we've got a better squad than the 49ers do.
Yeah, you hear so much about system quarterbacks, whatever. I think that he would fit into a system here fine because he's done that in the past with other teams, and he's won division titles with San Francisco in a well-coached, well-run organization, and I don't see any reason for that to change if he was to fall in another situation that was just as good, if not better, somewhere else.
Yep. And then, like I said, for me, I'm huge on Baker Mayfield, especially knowing that Cleveland botched the hell out of his trade value by not moving him before they knew they were going to sign Deshaun Watson. They knew that they were going to sign him. You don't on a whim offer the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history, not knowing that weeks to months prior. Like, you had to be prepping for that. They've said Baker Mayfield's not our quarterback. Baker Mayfield said, I don't want to be your quarterback. So my thought was always, Baker Mayfield is in a better position than Blaine Gabbert is. And Blaine Gabbert's in a better position than Kyle Trask is. So why don't we call somebody like a Baker Mayfield? I know he's on an expiring contract this year, but you could have essentially called Cleveland and said, hey, you owe Baker Mayfield $18 million this year. We'll pick up $3 million. You pick up the other $15 million, and we'll send you like a 4th round draft pick for him, because you're not going to play him anyway, and he doesn't want to be there. So let's get him out of here. Yeah, and then you've got him in your system for a year to learn the schemes and the playbook. I don't necessarily agree with the learn from Tom Brady thing, because I think Ryan Tannehill had a point when he said, it's not my job to teach the other guy. I think Tom Brady holds himself a little more accountable than that, but also ultimately it's not his job to teach the other guy.
Yeah, I agree. His job is to win. And if they were to bring in somebody like that, I think it'd be, nice to have a peace of mind of who you think could potentially fill in down the road. I think that it would just be good for management to have some sense of a direction right now, because just beyond this season, there's obviously a ton of uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, and there's always the idea that Jason Light and Bruce Arians do already have an idea, because they're very good at being secretive about things.
Yeah, they better have an idea. It's this year, and then who knows beyond then. So they have to be prepared for that, because I think the foundation is already laid for this season, and so they're always got to be one step ahead, and that's their job.
And most guys are under contract for 3+ years. Most of their star players at the skill positions are under contract for 3+ years now, with Evans, Godwin on offense. Leonard Fournette's there for another 3 years. Their offensive line is there. Like, everything is intact. So whoever takes over is being set up for success. And I think that's where you look to these guys that have had success on teams that are not quite as good as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster is. And then you turn and say, Jimmy G, Baker Mayfield, here's your prove-it deals. We're going to give you a small 1-year contract. Show us what you can do. Prove-it deals are not a new thing in sports, especially in the NFL. We see that all the time. Antonio Brown was on a prove-it deal. We just talked about him being on the trajectory of possibly being the greatest receiver ever. And because of personal issues, much like Baker Mayfield, he's on a prove-it deal. So I think there's a dynamic, and there is a path to bring in a quarterback rehabbing an injury like Jimmy Garoppolo is on a small contract. You think he's got an $8 million cap hit this year? That's nothing. We've got $13 million in cap space. Make a trade. Bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. He's already played with Tom Brady. He's already learned from Tom Brady. Like, there's already that camaraderie right there. And I think that's what you need to keep and continue to build upon as we look towards the future. Like you said, they need to have some sort of plan in place for next season, probably right now.
Yeah, because, I think that the work for this season is probably mostly done at this point. They have to have a pretty good idea of who's going to be out there, and the uncertainty beyond this year, is great. And I think that there would be a place for a quarterback at some level here at some point in the not too distant future of like you mentioned, a prove-it deal. That could be somebody that could be a solid quarterback that you believe in, and could also bring just great value of whenever you already have ever so much money committed to winning pieces that you believe in already. And I think that the value with the salary cap could be just another thing on top of just being a solid, somebody you can count on.
Yep. No, I'm 100% with you. And that, my friend, is going to wrap it up for us on this fired up Friday edition of Channelside Sports in the Morning. Henry, I appreciate you joining us and sticking around for the duration. We ran 10 minutes over where we normally are, which is I guess that's a good problem, right? That means that the conversation was flowing. hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. Make sure you follow Henry on Twitter at Henry Yoho and at Bolts by the Bay, of course. Fantastic Tampa Bay Lightning coverage. Everybody enjoy Game 2 tomorrow in Bolts Nation. We'll have Henry back on Monday as we talk about Game 2 and preview Game 3. And hopefully we're talking about a 1-1 evened up series on Monday. Who knows? I mean, even if they're down 0-2, that's nothing that we haven't seen in this postseason already.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's nothing new at this point. So I fully expect it to be 1-1, but if it's not, then it's not the end of the world either.
100% correct. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. Just search for the Channelside Sports Network. And of course, if you're on YouTube, please smash the subscribe button and hit the bell notification. Jump in the comments, and we'll feature your comments on the show. We like to interact with everybody. That's it for us on this Friday edition. Everybody have a great, safe, and fun weekend, and go Bolts.